All right, guys. Well, welcome. We have a incredible panel today with the ACT team from Advanced Nutrients. I'd love to kind of just go through and maybe talk about the differences in your guys' backgrounds and roles at Advanced. Maybe we start there. JJ, why don't you start us off?
My name's JJ. I've been with Advanced here, I think 4 months. I'm currently working with the ACT team, helping spin up, some of the cultivation techniques, going out there in facilities, working with the teams, teaching them how to get better results with our products. If I see some, tips and tricks that, they might be lacking as far as plant tech, I'll definitely point things out and make some suggestions. I tend to like to follow up with like a debrief of my visit, so that way the business owner, the DOC, everybody can sort of see what I saw, what I recommended, and what I would highlight and really focus on first. And that's sort of what I like to provide, and I like to, tell my team, lean on me as much as they possibly can. We're all here to really just help push cultivation forward.
That's right.
I'm Jacob Gibbs. I'm head of U.S. Commercial Support. I've been with Advanced for about 4 years now, and my background before that was managing facilities and operations management. So now with Advanced Nutrients, I am getting to help cultivators across the country, not just one facility at a time. So same thing as what JJ was talking about here, getting hands-on time with cultivators, being able to help point out fixes and things that they could work on in their facility, little tips and tricks, but also going the longer route of long-term project management with people, helping them dial in their facilities, helping them sort through issues that may not be fertilizer-related, but have expressed themselves in something that's looking like a fertilizer issue, and just helping people ultimately make sense of what's going on in their facility when maybe they've run into their rope.
Yeah. And Shane, how about yourself?
My name's Shane Callanan. Been with the ACT team for going on 2 years. Kind of was brought in early on as support for irrigation and fertigation design. I've been activated in that part of the space basically since COVID. Just started doing some independent builds and designing around the country. Done about 50 facilities nationwide.
Wow.
And been on the picks and shovel side of the fence in the industry for going on 20 years. Currently have a cultivation of my own, a facility in Michigan. And we do a little research and development for the Advanced team as well. And yeah, just have the pleasure of working with some high-level individuals to push the envelope and, develop and refine some techniques and strategies and products that have been 20 years in the making. And we're with this new 8th gen that we're about to launch, we're really bringing some cutting edge technology and refining it in a way that's approachable and cost effective for these commercial scale facilities.
And that matters so much right now when the pack price goes down.
Right.
What can you cut? You know?
Exactly. And the first thing people want to cut is nutrients. That is, it's a reoccurring cost. But it has a lot to do. Your inputs have a lot to do with your output of quality, and it's important that we make that connection.
Yeah. And Clovis, how about yourself?
Hi, my name's Clovis McCary, and I work here with the Advanced team. Prior to this, I was a petroleum engineer, and so I was very lucky in that aspect. I get to work with quite a bit of academia now, so I like that. I work with several of our universities that we work with. Very fulfilling getting to work with some of the future of this industry and helping define that.
Absolutely. So thank you guys for joining us today. I have some specific questions for each of you that we've drummed up. So just kicking things off with JJ here, I want to hear about your philosophy around plant count, spacing versus, building out a proper canopy and what that trend looks like right now.
Originally, say back in the early 2000s, right? A lot of guys, we did simple math. We're like, well, if we have 16 plants per light, there's 16 ounces in a pound. So if I get 1 ounce per plant, I hit a pound, right? But if I get 2 ounces per plant, I'm hitting 2 a light. Anything over that, it's bonus, right? That was sort of like before there was any real data, right? Any real collection of data. Now with under canopies, with LEDs, higher PPFDs, higher ECs, more targeted strategies as far as irrigation, you're able to lower that plant count drastically. I'm running a total of 9 plants now. That's sort of my sweet spot. 9 plants per light. it takes, maybe 4 or 5 more days to build out that robust canopy that I used to get with 16 plants. I don't like to top anymore. I notice topping creates way more branching. The more branching, the less airflow I'm getting through my canopy, raising the increases chances for molds and other pathogens. So no more topping, especially with under canopies. I'm doing very little touching of the plant at all. I mean, touching of the plant is how diseases and pathogens get passed around. And at a certain scale, when you get to commercial scales, the cleanest, quickest in and out you can get those plants through your facility, the better runs you're going to get. So, 9 to light, no topping, very little touching seems to give me the best result. As long as you have a proper dialed-in VPD and a decent irrigation strategy, you're going to let that plant perform to its fullest, and that's what I've noticed, since under canopies really started to come out over these last few years. It's really nice.
Hey, JJ, do you find that the reduced plant count has benefited the VPD?
100%.
Right.
I mean, it's so much easier on the equipment. You're loading these rooms up with so much material, then you're throwing so much water at them, right? Depending on what medium you're in, your poor dehues and ACs are just taking a beating every day. And these things are running 247, 365, right? So if you can get the plant count down, it definitely releases the pressure on your systems, which, gives you a better performance and definitely increases, an ROI while reducing your COGS. If you can reduce 25 to 30% of your medium, the material in the room, that's de-leafing. I mean, that's everything, right? And getting a higher return with less plants, less work, it's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go to Jacob next on the topic of climate. Balancing climate and lighting with fertigation, being flexible and dialing in less than ideal conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's a dynamic situation in a cultivation room. You've got your light, you've got your climate, you've got your plants, your fertigation. The plants are sweating off all this water into the atmosphere, just like we were saying. Cutting down on plant count can actually help your VPD if you're struggling with equipment always running all the time. But people kind of forget that they all interact together. So your lighting affects your transpiration. The temperature in the room, not just your VPD, affects your transpiration. There's a limit to how far you can push it. And so finding the balance is really the thing. I think in a lot of cultivation facilities in the last 5 years or so, people are getting a lot of their information off of social media of what they should be doing in their cultivation, but it's just a snapshot of the best day of that facility ever. So they think that the way that facility is doing it is the way it should always be working, and they forget that it's a dynamic decision-making process. You have to actually look at your room holistically, take into account whether or not you're overlighting or underlighting. If you're not able to cool to the effect that you want, if you're not able to deheat to the effect that you want, you have to look at other areas you can change things. Right. Stepping up or down your growing medium. There's a lot of things that people need to consider outside of just fiddling with one lever like nutrient strength.
Yeah. And Clovis, I want to go to you next on runoff and media management. What are some of your best practices around that?
So I'm a firm believer in data-driven decisions. So Arroyo has some new equipment where they can measure that runoff and give some interpretation of what it looked like. Back in the day, we would take and we'd leave a cup on the end of the table. It'd fill up at first. We'd pour that one off. We'd fill it up a second time, and then we would take all our measurements off that second cup. So that was really good for a long time. We have some newest sensors that are available to cultivators now. Teros 12, water content sensor.
And Shane, you guys are all about planning over here, and I know in Berlin, Mike was teaching me some of you guys' internal, programs that you have. But talk to me about planning. What I heard you have an acronym for us.
It's an old school acronym, but essentially, proper planning prevents poor performance, and that's a strategy to live and die by. If you're not actively living and dying by the calendar and the activities in your facility, it's very easy to step off the ledge. So I highly recommend people not only utilize a calendar, but automate components of that with reminders and certain things to from everything from your planting strategy to the timing of moving plants into flowering, to making sure that your materials are ordered in a proper time frame. And that's one of the things that we really promote with our clients is the last thing you want is to be caught with your pants down. You don't want to be turning around day 45 of flower and realize you're out of bloom, right? So utilizing basic technology that's available that we all use for our general life and applying that to the facility in redundancy has been a critical thing for the success of my location. And it's something that I think is, for whatever reason, very often overlooked. And that small strategy, it can really have a large impact.
I think to just piggyback on what you were saying real quick, Shane, scheduling is everything, right? Like you need a badass cultivator, someone who's like the plant sensei who can walk in and just tell the plants aren't happy, right? But on the other side of that, you need somebody who is OCD, calendar-driven individual who literally lives and dies by his calendar or hers. If you can find that person, and every facility that I've been to that has that person is successful. The facilities that have a wonky calendar seem to be, in the red and hurting, almost hanging on for dear life, So if there's anything you should take away from this little quick piece, the scheduling, it's almost the lifeline and success of a company at this point in cannabis.
And I feel like just across the board in any business, right? You're punctual, you're ordering or procuring products on time when you need it, and just being on schedule. It's everything.
Yeah, organization is everything, especially at this scale.
Yeah, plants love schedules. So tell me, when it comes to y'all's schedules, what's your favorite electronic data recorder? What equipment do you prefer to work with? For me, I like GrowLink.
I rock GrowLink as well. Personally, that's my go-to. I obviously, going around the country, working with different facilities, I can work with them all. But for my personal selection and choice, I definitely love working with GrowLink. They're easy to reach out to the guys. I reach out to the team anytime I have a question. They're right there to help support me and my customers or clients. So hats off to GrowLink. Respect.
Yeah, and for customers that don't maybe necessarily understand that data that comes out of the electronic data recorder, GrowLink will help you interpret that to a degree. Like that's really a service that they help us provide, is to help dial you in as well.
Well, and, they have that new co-pilot feature, right?
Love the co-pilot.
So not every guy, or girl in the industry is, hip to irrigation strategies and understands VPD and all those things. Well, now with AI and this little co-pilot feature that they've added, you get a 12-hour, bloom room going. You have a 3-hour window after that 12 hours. And it tells you, hey, your VPD was a little off, your irrigation strategy got a little off of our target. Let's change X, Y, or Z to try to drive it back into that direction. Now, you as a cultivator can say, nope, I looked at the plants, I went in the room, I love it. Fuck no, we're bypassing that on to the next day. But for the person that doesn't have that understanding, having the ability to select that and make those changes relatively at one button of a push, it's game over. It's a game changer.
To be able to look at it in retrospect as well, right? Collecting that data, having it help drive the process, but also being able to refine that process by having the data sets,
the analytics behind it. Exactly. You have to be able to analyze it afterwards. And I've used systems that are much more complex than some of the new systems that are coming out these days, with the software coming from Arroyo, the hardware and the software coming from GrowLink. And a lot of these traditional ag systems that tried to make their way in may be much more robust in their capabilities, but they are ultimately too complex for the end user to really grasp the understanding of the ins and outs of it. They don't have the type of support that some of these cannabis businesses that have built this out specifically to service the cannabis industry know the needs of those people that they're servicing. Whereas these ag companies like Priva and Argus and some of the other ones out there make an amazing product. It's so complex that I've seen it sitting, collecting dust in facilities because the people there could just never learn it. So they bought something else to overlay and just avoid this $200,000 system they purchased.
Yep.
Or even better, they've taken the automated system and they've put a person there stand there all day and do that one job. Oh, he hits
exactly.
a button to move this one tray over because that one spot don't work good.
Nutrient dosing in particular, it's like batch tanking. There is an art, there is a craft to it. It can be very similar to the microbrew, application, but having the precision and consistency, just like with your environment, if you're those slight mess ups that sometimes will be overlooked when people are making their own batches as opposed to just fully automating all of that, can have a long-term impact, and you won't necessarily see it until it's too late. So those specific functions and that technology has been huge for the industry as a whole.
So let's talk about biostems. I know that's something that you're passionate about, and let's talk about that in 2026.
Coming from a traditional all salt line, nothing else needed. I definitely started seeing the shelf life, right, of product just diminishing really quickly, right? Like in the room, it's banging, it looks great, it's sticky, all of that. You can get it pulled down, still sticky, great. Trim room, dry room, post-production, amazing. 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, that same weed that you were like in love with, you're not even smoking it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing that I've seen, right? And over the last year, I started going to facilities and I started seeing, more bios being added to recipes again, right? And those buildings happen to have the better flour. So it was just a night and day difference where I've go into one, fully salt, nothing else. Flour looked great. 3 weeks later, not so great. The buildings using biostems or other additives, that product stays really good long time in a bag. It actually gets better as you cure it, just like it did 24 years ago when I started, right? I know that purple weed tends to degrade faster. Most of us are growing purple weeds right now just as the market demand is there. But I still see better smokable, longer lasting product when biostems are in that recipe.
Yeah, for sure. That's something that we saw as a cyclical thing in the cannabis space. I think specifically in the fertilizer space, but also with pound prices. There were people that were getting less and less per pound, so they started cutting things from their recipe. They started cutting labor. They started cutting nutrients. They started trying to do more with less. That's the economy way, right? But now that people have started going back the other direction, they're bottomed out and they're looking for answers. They're looking for something to get better flour at the market so that way they can earn a little bit more money to stay in business. And we're seeing it happen day by day.
And what product line does that roll under? That's not the commercial craft line. Is that something else with you guys?
So we're kind of a choose your own adventure company because of the amount of products that we make. I always jokingly called myself the Snap-on man of the hydro world because I got a tool for you no matter what you need. But we have our base nutrients, and then we have our biostimulants line or section of the line, which is kind of part by part broken out through the different stages of the plant life cycle. They're not always all required, but they all serve a benefit. So there could be a little taste for somebody who needs a certain thing in a certain part of the cultivation cycle, but they're actually the bread and butter of our line. They're not a specific part of our line. We integrate it into all of our recipes. It's a matter of practice for us because we do know the benefit that'll come with it if people actually give it the shot and see what it looks like.
Yeah. And talking about some other, trending techniques, let's talk about DLI steering and the Emerson effect. You want to tackle that one, Clovis? Or Shane?
I'll let Jacob, because he just wrote our book on this, and he
Holy
had a
cow.
phenomenal presentation on it that he did. So as good as I could be, I really think that he'd probably tackle this particular one better than I will.
Okay, well, yeah. So the term DLI steering kind of follows in line with people using the phrase crop steering, right? But it's specifically focused around the amount of light that you're delivering to the plant every day. Daily lighting integral is what DLI stands for. But long and short of it is coming out of veg with a DLI that you can match going into flower to ease the transition, to reduce the stress on the plant during that transition. We're stress inducing by not allowing the plant to breed, but it's all controlled stress. So it's about providing the plant the maximum amount of resources that it can take advantage of always. And so that's kind of the thing I'm seeing a lot of people starting to experiment a little bit more with. We're starting to see people try to shave days off of flower by increasing light intensity for shorter periods of time. It's been pretty effective so far that I've seen out in the field, but the Emerson effect is something that originally had been struck down by the scientific community for cannabis, seeing little to no effect, even though on other crops it had been producing significant results, has since been reworked, and the effect of how people are delivering this end-of-day red cycle and how they're incorporating other light intensities throughout the day to make sure they're not shortchanging their total DLI for the day, I think is really where the big shift came. Was people were not where they were missing out on an hour's worth of intense light every day, and they were shooting themselves in the foot yield wise, but they might not, so they might be ultimately gaining a couple days of reprieve, but the yield was a little lower, so they might as well just run those extra few days.
Right.
There's so much that you can manipulate with the lighting. The spectrum is really coming into play more and more these days. Bruce Bugsby, that I know Clovis is rubbing shoulders with on a regular basis. The technology, the far red spectrum, UV applications, these specific stresses to the plant, allow us to manipulate and drive certain markers that you just can't do without that application. So I think as far as that goes, Clovis
you said it well. As far as the Emerson effect is concerned, we're trying to utilize something like, say, far red lighting for a certain period of time during the day, or maybe a certain amount. And I used to always tell people the best plant you could grow was the one that had the least stress. And I don't believe that anymore.
Right.
There's the stressing it appropriately is the best plant you can grow. And the Emerson effect kind of refers to that. How can we stress it, and what will that response be when we do that? And I do think that there is a lot more to still be learned, especially with far reds and utilizing some of the other spectrums. But we're definitely come a long ways. The Emerson effect was kind of... it came about in like the 1950s, so it's not necessarily a new thing, but as far as utilizing it the way that we are on high value crops, that is still a new developing, pioneering thing. So I think as we see that come out, people will do this. Everyone will swap to, full spectrum tunable lights, and they'll have a vegetative light cycle stage and an early flowering, a late flowering, and it will change.
Yeah, anybody or any facility that has room on the power panel, right, and capital are going to make these changes moving forward, right? Again, with a simple salt, line, you're creating stresses, stacking really high ECs and things, right, to get these little trick stresses out of the plant, where you can do it a lot more naturally with bios, right? Instead of just really fucking with the environment or changing up and stacking really high ECs to stress the plant. Some of these natural bios unlock those features in a more natural ease, like it's
less
more
dangerous.
easy. Yes, it's definitely more with the way the plant wants to grow in nature.
You pay a little more on the front end for the application, but you're not paying redundantly by running 4.0 when you could be running 2.0. So your EC values, being able to shift that, it's cost effective, and that's where we can really help people to scale back and not sacrifice quality, but hit some of the targets they're trying to achieve within their budget.
Well, and I think that's the thing that, the Emerson effect, the DLI steering, the under canopy, all these new tech advancements that are hitting the stage are giving cultivators an opportunity to increase their yield and increase their overall bottom line at the end of the year to a point where they're not worried about that extra $5,000 they spent on nutrients this year, because their COAs are 3% higher on average than they were getting. They're getting an extra percent of terps. Exactly. Like, the market speaks for itself. Once somebody's got good flower and they're spending a little bit more to get it,
but they're moving
happy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
When the packs are moving, and at the end of the day, every facility's, you got to spend money, right? But if you can spend it smartly and increase your ROI while reducing COGS, I mean, that's where the name of the game is right now. Whether it's plant count, or being a little bit more frugal. I mean, nutrients, you're talking about 3% of the business cost. So it's absolutely nothing when you really break it down. But it's something that you're engaging with every day. You're seeing a bill for it every week, every couple weeks. So it's something in the owner's mind that they're like, I need to reduce this. Or the procurement manager, right? The procurement person's like, I got to get this down. I got to get this down. But at the end of the day, like, cheap in equals cheap out. That's what I've seen,
Yeah.
So, if you want to be like stuck in that commercial pack, 7-point, market, that's where you're at, right? If you want to invest a little bit more into your business and get a bigger return, there's options. Like he said, we're sort of the Snap-on tool guys. Anything you want, we got something for you.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. As we're wrapping up here, I want to do a rapid fire round, starting with Clovis. What's one mistake you see a commercial grower make all the time? And what's one solution that they can start tomorrow?
So that's easy. This is the very first thing I do in every single facility I go in. And I pick up their pH probe and I test it versus calibration solution. And it's never right. I mean, I 90% of problems can be solved with this one step right here. pH, which stands for potential hydrant, is so incredibly important. And we negate how important it is, because if we didn't, we would not allow that piece of equipment to ever be out of calibration. So that is my most important thing I could teach anybody.
That's a good one.
I would apply that to all of your environmentals as well. I would say that where people are sometimes calibrating their pH pens, at the very least, their environmental equipment, rare to ever am I walking into a facility that's recently or ever calibrated their environmental sensors. So it's something that's similar to Clovis. It's one of the first questions that I ask. The other big one is under or over watering, something so simple as that. And that's where something like the technology that Arroyo has brought to the table at a very accessible price point for the industry has been able to give people some visual to that, as opposed to, guys that have been doing it for 20 years, where we're looking at the plant response and can really tell where things are at. That's another key factor.
Yeah, I would say the overwatering, underwatering, but specifically runoff. Runoff management is critical. A lot of cultivators, especially now that we've moved into the small container world, people are trying to avoid runoff. They're trying to cut costs. They're trying to save money on water, save money on nutrients. And oftentimes that leads them down a path of like unpredictable root zone chemistry, where now all of a sudden you're in week 3 or 4 and you've done a big D-leaf because you did your under canopy and you're cranking the DLI, and now you get a bunch of burn because you got this weird like rapid transpiration increase at the leaf temperature, at the leaf ecosystem right there around. And now all of a sudden you've got what appears to be as nutrient deficiency or toxicity. There's something that's come up because you didn't realize your root zone chemistry was out of whack. So underwatering specifically, but the overwatering, underwatering, I would say would be the biggest thing that I find people just don't ever track their irrigation patterns throughout their growth cycles to make sure they're always hitting the target for each zone of growth.
And I'll just piggyback on what each of them said, because each of those are just the first steps, right? I go in and I do typically still see the plant count being way too high. I see and feel so much air movement in the room that these guys are like got oscillating fans just whipping on plants, and I'm like, the stigmata is closed like days ago, bro. Like you went straight to initiation right to ripen, no bulk, because of so much wind flow. So just like I said, piggyback on what they said, then finally looking at plant counts and airflow in those rooms. Those are some of the biggest mistakes that I see people making still to this day. They still think more plants equal more weed. I've literally reduced plant counts and hit 200 more pounds out of the room, and the owner told me, well, if we would have had those 20% more plants, we would have even got... I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way, bro. I just proved my theory. So...
No, and I think you touched on it a little bit ago about the future of cannabis. We're not going to touch plants nearly as much. It doesn't make sense. The labor inputs are just not... The ROI is not there for it. We have to minimize the touching of the plants. So anyone who's out there doing it and they're starting it, the first thought in your process should be, how can I touch this plant the least so that I can make money at the end of the day? Because you can sell a product and not make money.
Oh, absolutely. The
2025 cannabis market.
I'm sure it could be like, show me a raise of hands out here. We'd have a wall full of them.
All going on.
What was that, Jacob?
Oh, no, I was just going to say that's kind of the thing that we're doing with the book is we gave out one of the chapters for free as a little teaser for pre-orders, and it's the bloom chapter. It's actually one of the shortest chapters because you should leave the plants alone. Like you shouldn't be constantly touching them. You shouldn't be constantly messing with them. you should be monitoring what's going on around them, what's going into them, what's coming out of them. But strategic touching points, cut down on labor. Labor is one of the biggest costs in commercial cultivation. And so if you can maximize your money spent on labor by not wasting it in areas where people don't really need to be there, and touching the plants is one of the biggest ones. Everybody thinks they have to get in there and fiddle with it. It's like, no, just trust that it's doing its thing.
Yep.
We've made this room perfect for it. We've given it everything it needs in the food. Just leave it alone.
Yep.
And I just want to say thank you, Jacob. Since you mentioned the book, The War Room, bro, it's going to be a defining piece of literature. If you haven't read it, you should go pick it up.
Let's not get too carried away yet.
It's definitely nice. I poked my head through it the first day I got access to it, and I think I spent the better of like eight hours, of my day just reading the book. It's definitely got some really good information in there. I think everybody's going to be very pleased at the tech and at the support you do see from Maine moving into 2026. We're out here ready to flip the market on its head again, and run this thing back a couple more times.
Let's do it. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Super appreciate you, and I'll see you on the next one.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks,
Nick.
Nick.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, bro.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate you guys.